Hey folks, Fernando doing another video for the Modern Survivalist. This is going to be an interesting one. Stick around if you're new to the prepper survival game, and also if you're a bit more of a veteran and you're trying to reconfigure some of your kits based on what is actually necessary, and maybe lean it down a little bit and get rid of some of the stuff that is not as important. So what I have here is the list of the contents that you should have in a 72-hour bug out kit. This is according to the Red Cross, and I cross-checked with different countries because you have Red Cross in different parts of the world, and it's mostly basically the same thing. You kind of see the same items repeating themselves. So what is it that the Red Cross thinks you should have? A couple suggestions, personal of my own, that I'm going to be making as well, and explaining maybe why it's not included in the kit of the Red Cross, which would make sense, I suppose, based on who's coming from. And also I'm going to be leaving the links below for some of the stuff that you may want to purchase. Also the links for my book, Street Survival Skills and the Modern Survival Manual. Street Survival Skills is my latest book, and it has several lists on the different kits, not just a bug out bag, but maybe more of a technical specified kit for your vehicle, your EDC, that sort of stuff. May be useful if you're looking to get organized. So let's get right away into this. Number one, the first thing they mention, of course, is a good backpack. And yeah, a backpack is absolutely important. This is the stuff where you're going to be, this is a thing where you're going to be carrying all your stuff. So you definitely want a bag that, as it says here, something that is comfortable, that it's solid enough, hopefully waterproof as well. That would be a big plus for your bag. That's a Miltech bag, the one I have there. There's several bags available for decent prices, and usually you find something with solid enough reviews in Amazon, so as to get something that's not super expensive yet gets the job done, which is carrying the stuff that you see here in a somewhat convenient manner. Number two, water. So that's something I like as well, that they start with what's really a priority here, which is water. It explains that you need about 2 liters of water per day. That may be, depending on where you are specifically, a gallon, 2 of water. It's gonna be depending on the kind of activities you're doing, heat, humidity, all that stuff, but at least a couple canteens of water just makes perfect sense. You may want to make at least one of those stainless steel bottle, because that's going to be allowing you to do a couple interesting, important things. Boiling water, and maybe even preparing, cooking food. That's something that makes a pretty big difference, having it or not, a metal container in a survival situation. So while you're at it, get yourself at least one of those, make it a stainless steel bottle. One thing that I haven't seen mentioned is water purification tablets. You see those there. Those are super lightweight, and there's really no reason not to have them. So I would suggest, I haven't seen it, at least not in this specific list, but I would suggest having it. And yes, of course, a water filter, of course, would make sense too. But the minimalistic thing would be at least having some water purification tablets. Number 3 moves towards having candles, LED lights, and chem lights, the chemical lights that you twist, break the little glass vial inside, and it's a chemical light. This is where I defer a little bit, especially when it comes to candles. I know that you see these, and I checked, as I was saying before, I checked with the Red Cross from different countries. In many of them, they mentioned the candle thing. I think that it's just dated. I think that really there's not a whole lot of reasons to go with a candle these days, especially when you have very, very good LEDs. I understand that maybe in some parts of the world, some lights are not as available as in others. But these days, especially the last few years, man, pretty much in even some of the poorest countries in the planet, you're going to be finding decent enough LEDs. What's the problem with candles? I mean, I've used candles for years and years. I mean, I'm not that young, so I was around even before LEDs, and you use those for when power went down. You just got a few candles from your, I mean, we had a dedicated candle drawer in my household when I was as a kid. So whenever lights went down, and it was actually very frequent, I would just, yes, use candles. What's the problem with candles? Well, first of all, they don't light worth a damn. I mean, it's better than nothing, but come on, it is very dim compared to some decent LED lights. But most of all, guys, this is the big point, most of all, it's a huge fire hazard. One of the main reasons why people end up dying during natural disasters, power outages, fire. So you do not want to have an open flame, especially when you can prevent it, and especially when you have so much better alternatives rather than that. Even chemical lights are being left behind, given how versatile these lights are. Now, I'm going to be leaving the links for some of these ones. These are headlamps using LED, and you have a couple of options in these ones. I've seen it under different brand names, but they're going for like 15 bucks a pack, like 2 of these for 15, 20 bucks. And these are LEDs that will last 12 hours more, depending on what light you're using. This one specifically has a floodlight and strobe. You have a red light there as well if you don't want to compromise your night vision, and then you have more of a focus, more of a better throw light, so as to see further away, greater distances. This combination, I think it's great. I think it makes perfect sense. So yeah, I've seen them under different brand names, and usually the reviews are quite good, but yes, this is something I would go for, at least having a couple. This is not mentioned in the list, but given how important it is, I would go with at least a couple of those and a dedicated hand torch, maybe 1,000 lumens, something for searching for someone that got lost or someone that is injured and maybe under rubble or whatever. That's something I think makes sense. I'm going maybe a little bit more in detail rather than what you see on your basic Red Cross, but the idea here is maybe giving you a little bit more information so as to apply that when necessary. Food. Now it goes into a bunch of different options: crackers, energy bars, cured meats, chocolate, and all that stuff. Canned goods. This would be the typical thing that the Red Cross would expect you to throw in a backpack, and it's okay. Something that is canned, you can open it, you can eat it. The idea is having something that's shelf stable, which this is, and doesn't require any additional water and doesn't require any additional cooking. You could eat this as it is. Of course, it's better if you heat it. Now, my suggestion would be avoiding some of these things that expire rather quickly and some things that melt, like chocolate and such. Go with rations. Those rations, well, you need a little bit of water so as to make it more palatable. You can eat it right away, but the big advantage of those is they're going to be lasting. Boat rations like those, Energy 5, they're going to be lasting 20 years. So that's something that you can literally leave there and forget for a very long time, and it can even be consumed by babies. You make with water, you make like a little paste, and even babies can eat that. So I would suggest going for that. Fire, they mentioned having matches or a lighter. I would say get both. Get matches and a lighter. And matches, in terms of lighter, Zippo, Clipper or Bic. Bic would be maybe the more traditional one, easily are found. Clippers are very good. For your matches, keep those matches. Get rid of the cardboard box, which is not worth a damn. Get yourself one of these plastic hard match cases. These are going to be protecting your matches from humidity. And this model has a piece of fire steel there, which it's not huge, but at least for a few fires, it's good enough. Moving on. A multi-tool or Victorinox type of knife. Yeah, you could go with a Victorinox. Some of the different models, some are very good. I like those quite a bit. I think that a multi-tool is even better. And yeah, this is a Leatherman Sidekick, which is a very decent little model, affordable. You could go with a Wave, which is a bit more expensive. These ones are okay. Now, the thing with multi-tools is usually you have to pay to get good stuff. It's not often the case. I mean, for knives, you can pay very little and get something that's decent enough. Multi-tools, not so much. Multi-tools, the cheap ones are usually quite crappy. And if you want a decent one, which you do, you will end up having to pay for that. Either Leatherman or Victorinox, those would be the brands that I would go for. All right, moving on down the list. So multi-tool, and it also mentions keeping your multi-tool greased. Don't put any grease on your multi-tool, just a little drop of mineral oil. That's all you need. Don't go with grease, which is way too much. A radio, one that uses, that has spare batteries, or better yet, has a crank so as to charge it, so as to know what's happening with the rescue efforts and the authorities in the middle of the disaster. And what they're basically talking about is something like this. These little hand crank radios, these are also intended to be used as flashlights, which are awful at that. And yeah, you have the crank, which as you see there is charging, and it's okay for that. You have a solar panel, which is just not good enough. But the radio does work, and you don't need that much power just to get our radio working. So with this one, yes, the crank will be enough just to power that radio and listen to what's going on. This is a decent alternative, especially for the radio stuff. Recharging, not so great. The flashlight is actually quite terrible, but the radio, yeah, and you want to have a radio by all means. Maybe you want to have a dedicated, walkie-talkie Baofeng UV5R type of radio, which we've mentioned so many times, and these have FM radio receiver as well, but they're not hand cranked. That thing, years later, you will still get some juice out of it, and that's why I think it's even a better idea for your 72-hour survival bag. What else? Spare set of clothes, absolutely agree with that. Kept in a sealed bag. Even better, get this in a food saver, vacuum seal, that would be even better. Shorts, underwear, t-shirt, depending on the climate where you live. This may be a big priority in your kit. If you live in some extreme cold weather climates, then yes, this will be even a bigger deal, and it's going to be maybe quite larger, and that's where the vacuum sealing thing comes into play very well. I'm in a more warmer type of weather, so I can get away with something more minimalistic, but this may be very important for your region, so keep that in mind. Maybe a spare set of sneakers and shoes there as well. It goes on, hygiene kits, toothpaste, toothbrush, floss, hygiene items for women. Yes, absolutely. Map of your area. It also says map of your house, and I was wondering about that, and someone in my Spanish channel mentioned that for earthquakes in some countries where this happens more often, sometimes it's difficult to know the layout of the house. So having a little diagram of your house or your building, if you live in one, makes it easier for rescue first responders and those first rescue efforts to have an idea of where people may be. Okay, so that's cool. That's something you may want to have in mind. Also, a map of your area, your region. It's not mentioning a compass. You may want to throw in a compass there as well. Some match boxes do have a compass and a whistle. Those little gadgets come in handy too. Cell phone. It's possible that the social network nets go down and phone signal goes down, but it's an important element to have, it says here, and yes, I absolutely agree. Even an old cell phone, just make sure you have changed the battery, replace the battery for your old phone so as to have more juice in it. But this is the kind of thing that will get this charged, and it's probably gonna be dead when you end up going for it. That doesn't matter if you have a solar panel like we mentioned so many times. It's not listed here, but you may want to add it. At least a charger, a USB charger for your phone. Even without a SIM card, even without network, you can still access Wi-Fi, which it's becoming more and more the go-to source for, maybe you're going to be using this rather than as a phone. You're going to be using it more like a little computer so as to access, email your contacts, get in touch with people, gather information. Think of it more as a computer rather than a phone. Of course, it's still a phone, and keeping a charge would be ideal, but at least having the option of charging it later on, or even better, get yourself the solar panel that we mentioned so many times. That's going to be allowing you to charge it no matter what. Okay, documents for identification, ID, passport, birth certificate, any important documents that you have. These should be kept in a plastic bag, sealed so as to avoid humidity damage. That's the kind of thing that I've usually mentioned having in your VIP bag, your very important paper bag, which I would also combine with something that's listed later on. Cash. I've also mentioned how I would have in my VIP bag, I would have important documents, passports, the cash that you have for emergencies, precious metals. Here's where gold, being so much more compact, makes more sense rather than silver. And having a firearm. That's something that's not going to be mentioned by the Red Cross, but I do mention it. No government organization will advise you to have a firearm for self-defense. That's kind of not the thing they usually do recommend, but personally, on a different level and not having that kind of bias, I'm going to be telling you, in my VIP bag, I would suggest having a firearm. It may be your traditional Glock, it may be something more simple like a good old revolver that more people in the household are familiar with or feel more comfortable using, giving their knowledge of firearms and their ability shooting one. But either way, that would be the bag that has the basic stuff that you just do not want to leave behind. Now, the way you organize all this, some people will have that bag within the 72-hour or bug-out bag already. But given that you're having a firearm, given that you're having maybe large amounts of cash and precious metals, maybe I don't want to leave that sitting in my bug-out bag, which is maybe going to be closer to the exit, closer to the door. And so I may find myself having that in a separate safe, something that is not easily accessible. But this may change for you. If you don't have such concerns, even better. You have all of this together and it's just one thing that you grab and go. But again, depends on personal circumstances. Contact information, emergency phones, friends, the contact list you would have in that bag as well, and you probably want to back all of that with a USB drive kept in there, and not just have paper versions, and maybe even files, photographs, little things that matter to you. You would keep all of those in a separate USB drive. Copy of your keys, your house keys, your car keys. The car key part is important because maybe you're rushing out in the middle of an emergency and you just don't quite remember where you left your keys. So having a spare set of keys in that bag, which may be separate or maybe within the 72-hour bag itself, but having that ready to go during an emergency, it makes a whole lot of sense. A whistle, a blanket or sleeping bag, paper, pen, so as to take notes. So yes, those last one, paper and pen, you probably keep that in that bag as well. In terms of sleeping bag, this is going to be depending a lot on where you are. These are a very good idea, these little BV bags. These are like the space blankets, but shaped as an actual sleeping bag. So it's not as big as a sleeping bag, of course. It's not going to be as warm as one either, but being that mylar type of space blanket material, it does keep you a little bit warmer than if you didn't have it, and it's very compact, it's very affordable, it's a bit tougher, it's a bit of an orange color, which will be nice, and this one has a separate whistle, so that's nice too, and it's actually quite loud. In terms of the first aid kit, you will have the typical stuff you have in there. It also mentions having some of the medications you need for any chronic disease that you may have. I would suggest staying in as much good shape as possible so as to avoid and not have to rely on any medication to keep you alive. So that's one of the big things that you may want to be working on. Something that's also mentioned in other lists that I found is having an N95 respirator because of dust, because of ash in the air, whatever is compromising your ability to breathe. A respirator makes a whole lot of sense. I mean, after so many years of being into this, I learned to appreciate the ability to breathe based on many first-hand accounts of all sorts of disasters. I would say have something like this ready. If there's real amounts of ash in in the air, or volcanic ash, or from fires, or debris from collapsed buildings, you will want something that allows you to breathe. Don't let any kind of stigma regarding masks, respirators, all that get in the way. Use your common sense. Go back to a few years and you will understand how this has always been a main part of any survivalist's kit. Okay, so a couple things are not mentioned here, and I feel that you probably should add. Having a decent knife. You know, I get it that usually with a little multi-tool or Victorinox, that's going to be enough, and maybe there's a little bit of PC, political correct bias going on here, but I'd say get a decent survival knife. You will see lots of people that like the smaller Mora type or Scandi grind. These are decent. I have a bunch of these. I would say get something a little bit larger. Get a bit of a bigger knife. This is the Glock knife, which is very good for the money. If you can afford it, get a stainless steel quality survival knife, something that's not going to be rusting, something that's tough, and sure, if it ends up being that way, you can use for a long-term survival scenario, which is more simple than dealing with a carbon steel blade that may end up rusting on you. Something you may also want to keep in mind is, and this may be depending on where you are specifically, like the region, if you're in the city, if you're more of a wooded area, but a pry bar, this makes perfect sense, especially for disasters where you may need more force than you're physically capable of on your own. The pry bar allows you to move larger objects, break your way through whatever is on the way. So something, crowbar like this, something like this makes perfect sense for me. If you're more in a wooded area and the ability of chopping down trees is important for you, either for making shelter, fire, because of cold weather, maybe getting an axe. That actually is a very decent axe. That Fiskars X11 is a very good way to go. Whatever it is you do, combine it with good working gloves. You may want to have eye protection as well. Working gloves are going to be allowing you to move all of these debris, objects falling, whatever it is, work, help out. Without gloves, it's going to be quite a bit more difficult than with them. All right, I think I covered everything. So yeah, that's basically it, folks. Remember that you'll have those links below for some of this stuff that you may want to get if it's missing in your kits, and for my book, Street Survival Skills and the Modern Survival Manual. See you in the next video. Have an awesome day. Take care.